Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from that table. The voice came sharp and clear, slicing through the quiet hum of the restaurant. Anthony Thompson looked up slowly from the fireplace table where he had just set his coat and phone. Candle lit, silverware gleaming, reservation card in plain sight. "I have a reservation," he said calmly. The waitress, Tricia, was already walking toward him, tray tucked under one arm, the other planted firmly on her hip. Her tone was clipped, her smile polite but hollow. She didn't glance at the reservation list. She didn't ask questions. "That table's for one of our VIPs," she said. "You can't just seat yourself here." Anthony didn't move. "I was told to wait here while my reservation was confirmed." The hostess, Tricia, interrupted. "She's new. Doesn't know how we do things." She motioned toward the front of the restaurant, toward the bar area. "There's a seat open up there." Anthony looked at the card on the table. "Reserved Thompson." Then met her eyes. "That's my name." Tricia squinted. "You're Anthony Thompson?" "Yes." She shifted her stance slightly. Her tone turned patronizing. "Sir, let's not make this uncomfortable. I need this table cleared before the actual reservation arrives." Anthony tilted his head. "You mean the reservation under my name?" The surrounding tables went quiet. A couple diners had stopped eating. A waiter walking past paused, slowly backing away. From a nearby booth, someone whispered, "That man's got more patience than I would." Anthony stood slow and unbothered. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. Tricia crossed her arms. "Calling someone to complain. I'm sorry, sir, but that won't get you a VIP seat." He tapped once and brought the phone to his ear. "Yes, I'm here now. They're saying the reservation isn't valid." A beat of silence. "No, don't escalate yet." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You may want to alert the owner," he said quietly. Tricia rolled her eyes. "I work here. I know the rules." Anthony gave her a calm, razor-sharp smile. "Then you're about to learn a new one." Tricia turned on her heel, muttering something under her breath, and disappeared into the back of the restaurant. Anthony remained standing. He didn't move, didn't follow, just calmly looked around the room. Eyes were on him now, some sympathetic, some curious, some pretending not to care, but listening all the same. From the kitchen doors, a short, flustered man in a navy vest rushed out. He scanned the dining room, then spotted Anthony by the fireplace booth. He approached fast, with a rehearsed smile. "Good evening, sir. I'm Paul, assistant floor manager. I understand there's been some confusion." Anthony didn't smile. "There's no confusion," he said calmly. "There's a reservation card on that table with my name on it, and yet your staff keeps insisting I don't belong here." Paul's smile faltered. I see. That must have been, well, Tricia tends to be overly cautious, but I can assure you, we have nothing but the highest respect for our guests." Anthony stepped slightly to the side, gesturing toward the untouched booth. "Then you won't mind if I sit?" Paul nodded quickly. Of course. Please, right this way." Anthony moved back to his table and sat down again, the way he had 10 minutes earlier. Except now, the energy had changed. Tricia returned from the back just in time to see Paul placing a menu in front of him. Her face froze. "You seated him?" she asked sharply. Paul gave her a quick warning glance. The table was his. Tricia's voice dropped to a whisper, but not low enough. "You're just giving it to him? You don't even know who he is." "I know exactly who he is," a voice said from behind them. Both turned. The general manager had arrived. Tall, composed, in a dark gray blazer and crisp white shirt. He looked like someone who didn't waste time. "Mr. Thompson," he said warmly, stepping forward. "I'm so sorry for the experience you've had tonight. It won't happen again." Tricia looked between them, confused. "You know him?" she asked. The manager didn't look at her. "I've known Anthony Thompson for years. He's not just a guest, he's the new owner of this property." Tricia's mouth opened. But no sound came out. Anthony didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you." The general manager turned back to Tricia. "Clock out. We'll be speaking later." And just like that, the entire restaurant understood what had just happened. Anthony hadn't raised his voice, hadn't demanded anything, hadn't needed to prove himself. He just waited. Because power doesn't panic. It watches. And then it owns. Every waiter in the building suddenly remembered how to be professional. Anthony Thompson sat back in his booth, calm as ever, sipping water from the glass Paul had just filled. A small plate of appetizers was placed in front of him, courtesy of the kitchen, complimentary of course. The restaurant was quiet now, but the air had shifted. Across the room, whispers moved like wind. "That's the owner?" It just sat down like nothing happened. "Yo, did you see her face when he said his name?" At the front of the restaurant, Tricia stood behind the counter, stiff and pale. She hadn't moved since the manager told her to clock out. Her hands were shaking as she folded her apron. Paul approached her quietly. "Might want to apologize before you go." Back at the fireplace booth, the general manager stood beside Anthony, clearly still trying to undo the damage. Tricia scoffed under her breath. "Apologize for what? For doing my job?"
Paul didn't argue, he just said, "You assumed who he was and weren't even close."
The manager hesitated. "I also wanted to say, personally, I'm sorry, you handled that with more class than most would." Anthony gave a small nod. "I appreciate that. We'd love to offer you a full tasting menu on the house," he said. "I've already spoken to the chef, he's preparing something personally for you." Anthony looked around the room, eyes passing over faces that had once judged him silently. "I've been here before," he said. The manager raised an eyebrow. "I thought this was your first visit." Anthony turned back to him. The manager looked down. "I understand. I don't mean this restaurant, I mean here." He gestured subtly around him. "This moment. The 'we didn't know who you were' moment." Anthony glanced back toward the hostess stand, where Tricia had finally taken off her apron. "No," Anthony said. "You will. After tonight I want mandatory training rolled out. Bias, conduct, language. The whole thing. Not just for waitstaff. For everyone. Consider it done." She paused, debating something, then slowly walked over to him. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, avoiding his eyes. "I just wanted to say." He held up a hand. "Let me stop you." Tricia froze. "I don't need an apology now that you know who I am," Anthony said. "I needed decency when you didn't." She opened her mouth, closed it. Anthony leaned forward slightly. "I'm not mad, I'm not here to get even, but I own this place now, and I won't let anyone else feel the way I did when I walked through that door." She turned and walked out of the restaurant, this time without a word. Anthony nodded once. "Good luck." Tricia lowered her head. "Understood." Anthony didn't smile. He just picked up his fork and ate. The kitchen doors swung open, fresh plates, beautifully arranged, arriving at his table like a crown being placed silently on his head. Respect doesn't come after recognition. It comes before it. And in that silence, with nothing left to prove, the restaurant finally understood. Anthony finished his meal slowly, not because he wanted to stretch it out, but because moments like these were rare, quiet, complete, and earned. The servers were no longer avoiding his gaze. They were watching him differently now, not out of fear, out of respect. The general manager returned to his table just as the dessert arrived. A rich chocolate tart with a gold-dusted garnish, and a handwritten note on the plate that read, "Welcome, Mr. Thompson. We've processed the internal ownership transfer," the manager said quietly. "The final paperwork will go through next week, but as of tonight, this property is officially yours." Anthony set his fork down. "I appreciate you handling it quickly. I hope we can continue working under your leadership," the manager added. "Some of us have been here a long time." Anthony looked at him for a moment. "Length of time doesn't always equal depth of learning," he said. "But I believe in clean slates." The manager gave a relieved nod. "Thank you, sir." From the far end of the room, the head chef peeked out from the kitchen. He was a tall man with tattoos on his forearms and a look of quiet curiosity. He didn't approach, just gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Anthony returned it. Across the room, a mother dining with her teenage son leaned in and whispered, "See that man over there? That's what real power looks like." The boy looked up from his phone. "He doesn't look like a CEO." The mother smiled. "That's the point. He doesn't have to." At the front of the restaurant, a reporter from a local blog who'd somehow caught wind of the incident stood outside the glass doors, phone pressed to the window, snapping blurry photos. Anthony noticed. He didn't flinch. He'd learned long ago the best way to silence ignorance wasn't to yell at it. It was to own the space it thought you didn't belong in. Anthony wiped his hands with the cloth napkin and stood. A few diners instinctively straightened up, unsure whether to greet him, nod, or just respectfully stay quiet. He gave a small nod to the room. Not a wave, not a performance, just a signal. "I see you. I'm good, I'm gone." As he reached the door, the same hostess who had seated him hours earlier stepped out from behind her stand. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked. "Yes?" She looked nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you for how you handled everything. I saw what happened. A lot of us did. And well, it meant something." Anthony gave her a soft look. "You ever feel like you didn't belong somewhere?" She nodded instantly. He smiled. "Then you know what to look out for. Use it." She smiled back, and for a moment something in her posture changed, like she stood a little taller. Anthony stepped out into the night air. The street was calm. His car waited at the curb. He got in the back seat, closed the door, and sat in silence for a moment. His assistant in the passenger seat turned to him. "Well?" Anthony glanced once in the rearview mirror at the building he now owned. Warm lights inside, clinking glasses, hushed tones. Then he looked forward. "Now," he said, "we open one that treats everyone like they belong at the best table." 2 weeks later, the changes began. Not with big press announcements. Not with flashy branding or a social media rollout. It started with a clipboard in the break room. At the top, mandatory culture reset, effective immediately. Below that, a list of training sessions, staggered across all shifts, morning, lunch, dinner, even late-night cleanup crew. The topics weren't vague. Implicit bias, guest interaction, when silence is complicity, unlearning gatekeeping. Trisha's name wasn't on the list. She was gone. But everyone else noticed the blank spot where it used to be. Anthony didn't micromanage the restaurant. That wasn't his style. But he was present, regularly. He came in quietly, not in a suit. No entourage. Sometimes just to sit and watch. Sometimes to speak to the staff. And when he did speak, he didn't talk about numbers or image. He talked about moments. One afternoon he sat at the staff table in the back. No clipboard, no phone, just him. "You know what people remember?" he asked. The team stayed silent. "They don't remember the food. Not really. Not the price. Not the wine." He paused. "They remember how they were made to feel when they walked in." The head chef nodded slightly. The dishwasher, a kid named Remy, scribbled something in his notebook. The new shift lead, a young woman named Kiara, asked softly, "Even if they don't say anything out loud?" "Especially then," Anthony said. Word began to spread, first inside the building, then around the block, then across the city. This wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was his restaurant, and it felt different. Customers came in, expecting elegance, and got something more. A warmth they couldn't name, a quiet dignity in the service. A sense that this place didn't care what you wore, what car you drove, or how familiar you were with the wine list. Only one thing mattered here. You belonged. Anthony's story started circulating, first whispered by regulars, then shared by influencers, then reposted by business pages. Not because it was scandalous, because it was inspiring. And that meant the attention came next. Business soared. Reservations doubled. But Anthony didn't celebrate numbers. He celebrated the shift in tone, in posture, in how people looked at each other when they didn't think anyone was watching. He knew people wouldn't always remember what was said, but they'd remember how it felt when they saw a man take back his seat without shouting, without begging, and without losing a shred of dignity. Just because he owned the room now didn't mean he needed to prove it. He already had. The dining room was full. Again. It had been like that for weeks now. Ever since the story broke. Anthony sat at the bar this time, watching quietly. Not observing to catch mistakes. Not checking on service. Just watching the flow. A young couple was seated near the windows. They looked nervous, like they weren't sure if they belonged in a place this nice. Kiara, the new shift lead, walked over to them with a soft smile and made them feel like royalty within 30 seconds. In the far corner, an older man in work boots sipped red wine by himself. Every so often, a server stopped by to check on him. Not because he looked important, but because here he was. Anthony's assistant, Maya, walked in and took the seat beside him. She ordered coffee. No cream, no sugar. Third blog this week, posted about the restaurant, she said. BuzzFeed just called it the most respectful place to eat in the city. Anthony smirked. Respectful, huh? Not fancy? Not elite? Maya grinned. We're not playing their game. No, Anthony replied. We're rewriting it. She pulled out her iPad. Also, the new staff evaluations. Night and day. Kiara says employees are sticking around longer. Fewer complaints. Higher tips. Guests are friendlier too. Anthony glanced around the room again. Amazing what happens when people are seen. Maya tapped through a few screens. Oh. And Trisha? Anthony looked over. Curious. She applied for a server job across town. Got denied. Words out. Anthony nodded slowly. Then paused. I'm not interested in keeping her down. I know, Maya said. Just thought you'd want to know. Anthony sat in silence for a moment. Then said, invite her here. Maya blinked. What? As a guest. No cameras. No drama. One table. Just to see what it feels like. You sure? She asked. People don't grow from being dragged, he said. They grow when someone shows them a door and leaves it open. Later that evening, as Anthony stood to leave, a teenage busboy rushed up to him near the exit. Mr. Thompson, he said, slightly out of breath. Can I ask you something? Anthony turned. Of course. Did it hurt? Like, when that waitress talked to you like that, before you owned the place? Anthony smiled gently. Yeah, it did. The kid hesitated. But you didn't yell. I've done that before, Anthony said. All yelling does is let them control your tone. Silence? That's when you're in control. The busboy nodded slowly. I think I get it. Good, Anthony said. Now keep doing your job right, and one day you'll be sitting in my seat. The boy smiled. Anthony stepped out into the night. Same street. Same building. Same man. But the story? Completely different now. Anthony stood in front of the tall window of his corner office, coffee in hand, watching the morning light pour across the city skyline. The restaurant had only been under his ownership for a month, but the transformation had been undeniable. He didn't just own the space, he had reshaped its soul. Still, not everything was smooth. His inbox was filling up with invites. Conferences, podcasts, TEDx talks. Everyone wanted to hear the story, to ask him how it felt to turn humiliation into ownership. But Anthony wasn't interested in headlines. He was interested in something deeper. He took a sip of his coffee, then turned as Maya entered, tablet tucked under her arm. We've got a situation, she said. Anthony raised an eyebrow. At the restaurant? No, she replied. Online. She turned the screen toward him. A video was trending. Trisha, sitting in her car, tear-streaked, talking to the camera. I didn't know who he was. I didn't mean to be cruel. I just thought he was another guy trying to sneak into the premium booths. That's what we're trained to watch for. I was wrong. The comments were a war zone. Half the people were shredding her apart. The other half were debating if she deserved forgiveness. Anthony watched silently. After a moment, he said, she's trying to be seen now. Maya narrowed her eyes. Or she's trying to save face. Same thing, Anthony said, different side of the mirror. He looked back out the window. I offered her a table. Maya nodded slowly. She declined. I figured. He sat down at his desk, folded his hands. Let the story die. You sure? Anthony nodded. I didn't rebuild this place to hold grudges. I rebuilt it so no one would have to prove their worth at the door. Maya hesitated. So, no comment. No, Anthony said. She can talk. Let her. If people want to listen to her more than they listen to how we treat our guests every night, that's on them. He leaned back in his chair. What matters is what happens next. Not what already happened. Later that night, Anthony stopped by the restaurant again. Not to inspect, just to be present. He didn't sit at the fireplace table this time. He took the smallest seat in the corner. A server approached. Mr. Thompson, you want your usual? Anthony smiled. Surprise me. As she left, a young man at a nearby table leaned over. Hey, he said. I know who you are. I just wanted to say, I brought my little sister here tonight. Because I wanted her to see what respect feels like. Anthony looked at the girl. Maybe 12. In a hoodie, nervously picking at her water glass. She deserves that, Anthony said. We both do, the guy replied. Anthony nodded. You're right. And that was the real reward. Not the table, not the title, but the ripple. The quiet shift of what was normal into what was finally right. A week later, Anthony walked into the restaurant just after closing. Chairs were stacked, lights dimmed. Only a few team members remained. Cleaning, wiping menus, resetting the room for tomorrow. He liked coming at this hour. No crowd, no noise. Just the heartbeat of the place, steady and honest. Jason, one of the new hires, looked up from behind the bar. Evening, Mr. Thompson. Anthony nodded. Still getting used to closing shift? Jason laughed. I'm getting faster. Not perfect, but I haven't broken a wine glass in 4 days. Anthony smiled. That's a win. He walked over and picked up a fresh cloth, casually helping wipe down one of the tables. Jason hesitated. You really don't have to do that. I know, Anthony said, but it keeps me grounded. As they worked, the front door creaked open. Kiara popped her head in. Sorry, forgot my jacket. She grabbed it from the back and turned to go, then paused. Oh, she said. I almost forgot. Table 7 tonight. That older gentleman with the hearing aid? Anthony nodded. He asked me to give you this. She handed him a small white envelope. No return name, just his first name written on the front. Anthony opened it and unfolded the letter inside. Mr. Thompson, I don't know you personally, but I watched what happened here weeks ago. I've eaten in this feast for years, and for the first time, I saw it change. Not just the food, the air, the attitude, the care. It feels human again. I never owned a business. Never had much money. But I know what dignity feels like. And you've brought it back. Thank you. Anthony folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. That was kind, Jason said quietly. Anthony didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, looking out at the now empty street. We're not changing how people eat, he finally said. We're changing how they feel while they do it. Jason leaned on the counter. So what's next? Anthony smiled. Just a little. We do it again. Another restaurant? Maybe, Anthony said, but not just to expand, to raise the bar. Jason hesitated. How will people know we're different? Anthony turned toward him. They'll know the moment they walk in. No velvet rope, no measuring them up, just a welcome that feels real. He picked up the last napkin and folded it into a perfect triangle. I want them to feel like they're walking into a place where respect isn't earned by status. It's given by default. Jason nodded slowly. I'd work anywhere that felt like that. Anthony patted the table. Then help me build it. The lights dimmed lower. One last glance around the room. Anthony stepped outside, locking the door behind him. And for the first time in a long time, the weight he carried didn't feel heavy. It felt worth it. It started with a single photo. A customer had snapped it quietly. Anthony sitting at the bar, wearing his usual understated clothes, laughing with one of the cooks during a late shift. No flash, no pose. Just a real moment. They posted it online with a simple caption. This man turned a restaurant into a place where everyone feels like a somebody. Didn't know who he was the first time I came here. Now I'll never forget. The post blew up overnight. Not because it was flashy. Because it felt true. By the following morning, the Anthony effect was trending. People began sharing their own stories. A woman in a wheelchair wrote about how she was welcomed with ease and dignity when other upscale restaurants barely made space for her. A father said he brought his autistic son in, expecting side eyes and tension, but instead the staff adjusted lighting and volume, offered crayons and calmness, and made them feel like family. A college student wrote, "I walked in with thrift store shoes and got treated like I walked in with a gold card. That's the kind of restaurant this is." The internet started paying attention again. But Anthony didn't. He wasn't looking for a viral moment. He was building a culture. One night, Maya burst into his office with a grin. "Guess what?" she said. Anthony raised an eyebrow. "We just got nominated for a city award." She beamed. "Hospitality Innovator of the Year." Anthony paused. "That a real thing?" "Apparently," Maya said. "They called your story the new blueprint for leadership in the service industry." Anthony smiled faintly, but his tone stayed grounded. "Not a blueprint," he said. "Just common sense people forgot." Later that week, he stood at the front of the restaurant as the first customers of the evening walked in. One was a teenager in basketball shorts and a hoodie. The other was a man in a tailored navy suit. The hostess welcomed them both the same way. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" The boy nodded. "Yeah, under Jordan." "Right this way," she said with a warm smile. Anthony watched from a distance. Not because he was checking up on anyone. Because it reminded him, the real power wasn't in owning the building. It was in changing what it stood for. That night, a reporter showed up unannounced. She waited patiently near the bar until Anthony noticed her. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "do you have a few minutes?" "I do. I wanted to ask you just one question for the feature," she said. "Why this restaurant? Why this mission?" Anthony thought for a moment, then answered quietly. "Because when I was younger, I spent years trying to get into rooms that made me feel like I didn't belong." He looked around the dining room, filled with people laughing, talking, eating without fear of judgment. "So now I build rooms," he said, "and I make damn sure everyone fits." The day of the award ceremony came faster than expected. Anthony hadn't planned to attend. He wasn't big on applause or staged praise. But his team insisted. "This isn't about you," Maya said as she adjusted his tie in the back room of the restaurant. "It's about all of us. You gave us a standard. Let them see what it looks like." Anthony exhaled through his nose. "Fine, but I'm not writing a speech." "You won't need one," she smirked. They arrived just before the event began. The venue was upscale but familiar. White lights, linen-covered tables, polished silver on every surface. As Anthony stepped inside, people turned, not because he made a scene, but because they recognized him now. Not just as the guy who owned that place on East 7th, but as a name people were beginning to associate with change. He shook hands politely, took a photo or two, sat at a modest table in the back, the way he preferred. When his category came up, Hospitality Innovator of the Year, the announcer didn't read a long bio. She just said, "He didn't make a louder restaurant. He made a quieter revolution. The kind you feel the moment someone greets you without judgment." This year's winner, Anthony Thompson. Applause filled the room. Anthony stood slowly, walked to the stage. He didn't pull out a paper, didn't adjust the mic. He just looked out at the crowd. "I wasn't going to speak," he began, voice calm. "But then I thought, if there's one room I should say this in, it's this one." The audience leaned in. "Restaurants are like mirrors," Anthony continued. "They show you what you think people deserve." He paused. "And for too long, a lot of places have been holding up broken mirrors." A few murmurs of agreement. "I didn't fix mine by changing the food. I changed how we treat people." "That's it." He stepped back. "And if that's innovation, then hospitality was broken to begin with." He left the stage to a standing ovation. After the event, as people mingled, a woman approached him. Middle-aged, kind eye. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "you don't remember me, but I trained Tricia years ago." Anthony paused. "You did?" She nodded. She was always tense, always trying to prove she belonged in fancy places. Somewhere along the way, she started thinking that meant keeping others out. Anthony folded his arms. "That tracks. I just wanted to say," the woman continued, "I watched your story, and I cried. Because it's not just about her. It's about all of us who forgot what service really means." Anthony nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." She looked at him for a moment longer, then added, "Thanks for reminding us." That night, Anthony walked back into his restaurant. Award tucked under his arm, tie loosened, jacket slung over one shoulder. The late-night shift was wrapping up, music low, kitchen quiet. He placed the award, not in a case, but on the shelf behind the host stand, right at the front, so every person who walked in would see it. And no, this place wasn't built to impress. It was built to welcome. It was a rainy Thursday when Anthony decided to open the doors early. The restaurant normally didn't seat guests before 5 p.m., but something about the quiet storm outside made him want to shift things. "Let's try something different today," he told the morning team. "Put the open sign out now. No reservations required." Kiara blinked. "You sure? That's not usually how we—" "I know," Anthony said. "But sometimes you catch someone at just the right moment." By 11:20 a.m., someone walked in. She stood just inside the door, soaked from the rain, her coat clinging to her frame, hair frizzy, no umbrella, no reservation, and no idea who she'd just walked into. It was Tricia. She looked around like she hadn't expected the place to look so alive. The light was soft, the music gentle, and the mood warm. She stepped forward awkwardly, scanning the space like a tourist returning to her hometown years later. Kiara approached, polite but guarded. "Hi there. Welcome in." Tricia nodded. I used to work here. I don't want anything free, just wanted to see it." Kiara hesitated. Anthony, standing at the end of the bar, watched in silence. Then he spoke. "She's not here to eat," he said. "She's here to feel it." Tricia turned to him, startled. "You remember me?" "I remember how people make others feel," Anthony said. "Good and bad." She lowered her eyes. "I came to say I was sorry. Properly this time. Not because people told me to, just because I finally realized I needed to." Anthony nodded slowly. "Took courage to walk through that door." "It took longer than it should have," she admitted. He gestured toward a small table near the window. "Sit down." She paused. "Really? Everyone gets a second table," he said. "Even if they never earned the first one." Tricia sat. A server brought her water. Anthony walked over and set a simple paper menu in front of her. "Try the soup," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's honest." She smiled for the first time. "That's what I need." For the next half hour, Anthony didn't hover. He didn't lecture her. He just let her eat. Let her experience what she once denied someone else. And when she left quietly, gratefully, she looked back once before stepping out into the rain. Anthony watched her go, then turned to Kiara. "You think she changed?" she asked. He shrugged. "Don't know. That's up to her." Kiara smiled. "But you gave her a table anyway." Anthony looked out at the empty seat. "Because someone once gave me one." A month later, the restaurant was buzzing. Not with noise, but with life. There were no celebrities seated in the corner. No flashy influencers filming every bite. Just people, real people. Families celebrating milestones. Couples holding hands over wine. Solo diners reading paperbacks between bites. It was exactly how Anthony wanted it. He stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching the rhythm he had helped create. It was more than a restaurant now. It was a symbol. Across the country, other owners had begun calling, asking for help, redesigning not their menus, but their mindsets. "Could you train our staff? Could you speak to our leadership? Could you help us fix our culture?" Anthony always asked the same question first. Do you actually want change? Or just the praise that comes with pretending? Because one of those paths took time. The other took nothing at all. That afternoon a letter arrived at the restaurant. Handwritten. No return address. Anthony opened it in his office, unfolded the crisp paper, and read, Mr. Thompson, I don't know if you remember me. I was at the next table the night they tried to move you. I said nothing. I watched. I assumed someone else would speak up, but no one did, and I've regretted it every day since. Watching what you built here, watching how you lead with strength and peace, has changed how I show up in the world. You taught me that silence isn't neutral. It's just comfortable cowardice. Thank you for not becoming bitter, for choosing better instead, for showing all of us how to do the same. Anthony folded the letter slowly. He placed it in the drawer beside 3 others, just like it. Different words, same theme. People watching, people learning, people growing. That was the legacy he was building. Not one of revenge, not one of dominance, but one of restoration. That night, the fireplace booth, the very one he was once told to leave, sat empty. Anthony walked over and took a seat. Just for a moment. He didn't stay long. Didn't need to. He just ran his hand across the tablecloth, smiled at the little reserved Thompson card tucked into the holder, then stood up, straightened his collar, and walked back into the kitchen. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a quiet man who turned the loudest insult of his life into the most welcoming place in the city.